In the heart of ancient Rome, a name echoed through the marbled halls of power, a name that would be etched into the very fabric of history: Gaius Julius Caesar. Born on July 12, 100 BC, into a noble but not particularly wealthy family. Few could have predicted the colossal shadow this man would cast over the world. But this isn't just a story of dates and battles. This is the story of a man whose ambition was as vast as the territories he would one day conquer. A man whose charisma could sway the masses and whose mind could outwit the most cunning of senators. Imagine Rome, a bustling, chaotic republic teetering on the edge. It was a world of political intrigue where alliances were as shifting as the sands of the Sahara. Into this volatile arena stepped a young Caesar. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a political animal, a brilliant orator, and a master of public relations. He understood something fundamental about power. It wasn't just taken, it was given by the people. But how did this young man, who once had to flee Rome for his life, rise to become its most powerful figure? How did he navigate the treacherous waters of the Roman Senate, filled with rivals like the great General Pompey and the staunch Republican Cato? The answer lies not just in his military genius, but in a series of audacious gambles that would either make him a legend or see him executed as a traitor. One of his earliest and most daring moves came in 60 BC. He saw that the Republic's power was fragmented among its strongest men. Instead of fighting them all, he did the unthinkable. He brought them together. He formed a secret pact with the fabulously wealthy Marcus Licinius Crassus and the celebrated General Pompey the Great. This alliance, known as the First Triumvirate, was a political earthquake. It was a secret handshake deal that effectively bypassed the Senate and placed the fate of Rome in the hands of three men. Caesar, the junior partner, had just placed himself at the heart of Roman power. This was his first great power play, but it would be far from his last. The stage was set, the players were in position, and Caesar was just getting started. With the backing of his powerful allies, Caesar secured the position of consul in 59 BC, the highest office in the Republic. But 1 year in office wasn't enough for a man of his ambition. He needed a platform to build his reputation, his wealth, and, most importantly, a fiercely loyal army. He set his sights on Gaul, a vast and wild territory covering modern-day France, Belgium, and parts of surrounding countries. In 58 BC, he began the Gallic Wars. For nearly a decade, he campaigned relentlessly. This wasn't just a military campaign. It was a masterful piece of public relations. Caesar wrote his own accounts of the wars. The Commentary de Bello Gallico. In these dispatches, sent back to Rome, he painted himself as a heroic, brilliant general, protecting Rome from barbarian hordes. He described thrilling battles, daring sieges, like the one at Alesia in 52 BC, where he trapped the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix and defeated a massive relief army by building an incredible set of 2 concentric walls. He became a superstar in the eyes of the Roman people. His soldiers, who shared in the spoils of war and revered his leadership, were loyal to him personally, more so than to the Senate or the Republic. While Caesar was gaining fame and power in Gaul, the political landscape in Rome was fracturing. The first triumvirate, the very foundation of his power, crumbled. Crassus was killed in a disastrous campaign in the east in 53 BC. The bond between Caesar and Pompey, already strained, was broken by the death of Caesar's daughter Julia, who was Pompey's wife. Now, there were only two titans left. Pompey, alarmed by Caesar's rising popularity and his private army, aligned himself with the conservative senators who feared Caesar's ambition. They saw him not as a hero, but as a potential king, a tyrant who would destroy the Republic. The Senate issued an ultimatum. On January 1st, 49 BC, they declared that Caesar must disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen, where he would surely face prosecution from his enemies. Caesar was at a crossroads. He stood with his 13th Legion on the banks of a small river called the Rubicon, the northern boundary of Italy. To cross it with his army was an act of treason, an open declaration of war against his own government. It was a moment of immense gravity. Legend tells us he hesitated before uttering the famous words, "Alia iacta est," the die is cast. On January 10, 49 BC, he led his legion across the Rubicon. There was no turning back. The great Roman civil war had begun. Caesar's march on Rome was shockingly swift. He moved with a speed that caught his enemies completely off guard. Pompey and the senators, panicked and unprepared, abandoned the city and fled to Greece to regroup and raise armies. Caesar entered Rome not as a conqueror but as a supposed liberator, playing the part of the wronged populist hero. The war, however, was far from over. It would rage across the entire Roman world, from Spain to Egypt. The decisive confrontation came at the Battle of Pharsalus in Greece on August 9, 48 BC. Caesar was heavily outnumbered, but his tactical genius and the veteran skill of his legions won him a stunning victory. Pompey fled the battlefield, seeking refuge in Egypt. But his fate was sealed. The young Egyptian pharaoh, Ptolemy XIII, hoping to curry favor with the victor, had Pompey assassinated as he stepped ashore. When Caesar arrived and was presented with Pompey's head, he reportedly wept. He had not sought his rival's death, only his defeat. In Egypt, Caesar became entangled in a local civil war, famously siding with Cleopatra, whom he helped install as the sole ruler. His time there was a mix of politics, war, and romance, further solidifying his legendary status. After quelling remaining resistance in Africa and Spain, he returned to Rome in 45 BC, the undisputed master of the Roman world. He was showered with honors and appointed dictator perpetuo, dictator for life. As dictator, Caesar launched a flurry of reforms. He relieved debt, reformed the calendar, creating the Julian calendar that we still largely use today, and planned massive public works projects. He granted citizenship to people in the provinces and settled his veterans on new land. To many, he was bringing order and stability after a century of civil strife. But to the old guard of the Senate, he was a tyrant who had crushed the Republic's ancient liberties. His face was being put on coins. Statues of him were erected alongside those of the gods. To them, he was acting like a king. A conspiracy began to form, led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus. They were not just political rivals. Brutus was a close friend, almost a son to Caesar. They called themselves the Liberators, believing they were acting to save the Republic. They chose the Ides of March, March 15th, 44 BC, as the day to strike. On that fateful morning, Caesar went to a meeting of the Senate held at the theatre of Pompey. Despite warnings and bad omens, he entered the hall. The conspirators surrounded him, pretending to present a petition. Suddenly, they drew daggers hidden in their togas. One by one, they stabbed him. He fought back initially, but when he saw his friend Brutus among the attackers, he is said to have pulled his toga over his head and resigned to his fate, perhaps uttering the final, heartbreaking words, "Et Brute, and you, Brutus." He fell at the foot of a statue of his great rival Pompey, dead from 23 stab wounds. The assassins believed they had saved the Republic. They were tragically wrong. Caesar's death did not restore the old ways. It plunged Rome into another round of brutal civil wars. From the ashes of that conflict, one man would eventually rise. Caesar's own adopted son and heir, Octavian. He would finish what Caesar started, defeat all his rivals, and become Rome's first emperor, taking the name Augustus. The republic that the conspirators had killed Caesar to save was gone forever, replaced by the Roman Empire, an empire forged by Caesar's ambition and sealed with his blood. Gaius Julius Caesar lived for just under 56 years, but his impact is immeasurable. He was a complex figure, a populist champion and a ruthless conqueror. A brilliant reformer and an autocrat who destroyed a 500-year-old republic. His life is a timeless story of ambition, power, betrayal, and the eternal struggle between liberty and order. A story that, over 2,000 years later, continues to fascinate and instruct us. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into history, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.